Through the grimy glass, I could see several large shapes in a gloomy room. What they were, I couldn't imagine. Pardon me.
Oui, monsieur?
The sign on the tripod says it was found at a Templar preceptory.
It does?
You don't know anything about the tripod, do you?
No, I don't. I never had much of a start in life, you see. I owe what little education I gained to my uncle. He was an optician, but he also doubled as the village school teacher. He taught me the alphabet. Well, 19 letters of it. The bottom row of the chart was too small even for him to read, so he left them out.
Why don't you start over and enroll for adult education?
You know, I never thought of that. Do you think if I studied hard and did all my homework, I could be a professor of history?
At your age? Dream on. Can you give me any further information about the tripod?
Certainly, monsieur. It's infamous. That tripod, that belonged to John Dee.
What's the importance of John Dee's tripod?
Dee was the most famous escapologist of the 16th century, the Houdini of his time.
Don't you mean alchemist? Escapologists use ropes, chains, and handcuffs, not tripods.
Well, whatever he was, that is the tripod he used in his experiments.
What kind of experiments did John Dee perform with his tripod?
Oh, the usual. Didn't you study chemistry at school?
Yeah, but we skipped over thaumatology. Can I take a closer look at the tripod?
What? Get it out of the case? Ah, no! That tripod is protected by a sophisticated surveillance system.
How sophisticated?
A painfully loud alarm bell.
How is the alarm bell triggered?
By the slightest pressure on or movement of any part of the case wherein that tripod is situated.
It strikes me that to call your alarm system sophisticated is, well, stretching the truth a little.
It has never failed yet. The sophistication is in its simplicity.
Thanks for your help. The case contains some fragments of pottery. They look to me like broken flower pots. Above them, a sign read, L'Âge Paléolithique. The case contained 2 rows of silver coins. Each coin on the lower row showed a portrait of a guy with a huge nose. It was a tapestry of a lady, a lion, and a unicorn. If I'd had more time, I could have stared at it all day. The totem pole looked distinctly out of place in the setting of the museum. It was an ancient Egyptian sarcophagus with a beautifully painted effigy of its owner on the lid. It was a statue from ancient Egypt. Those old civilizations sure could teach us a few things about art and beauty. I beg your pardon. Are you André Lobineau?
That's me. You want my autograph?
No, I was told you may be able to help me.
Help?
My name is George Stobart. I'd like your professional opinion.
Well, okay, shoot.
I'd like your opinion on a medieval manuscript.
Vraiment? Do you have it with you?
No, it's too fragile. And besides, there are certain people who'd stop at nothing to get their hands on it.
Intriguing. Do you have a copy of the text?
There isn't much, only a few Latin phrases. I was kind of hoping you'd help decipher the pictures.
Without seeing the manuscript, that's a tall order.
Just tell me one thing. What does the image of two men riding on the same horse suggest to you?
The Knights Templar. Does the Templar seal appear on this manuscript? I'd love to see that for myself.
The manuscript is being looked after by a friend.
In Paris?
Yeah, not far from here, in fact.
Well, just give me the address and I'll come round and take a look.
I'm not so sure about that. Maybe I should check with her first.
A female friend?
Yeah, she's a woman. Maybe it was my imagination, but I noticed a predatory look in his eye. Suddenly, this friendly historian had turned into the big bad wolf. This friend who has the manuscript?
Are we, the anonymous girlfriend?
She lives at 361 Rue Jarry.
Ah, I know it well. I'll drop by. Just as soon as I can.
Can you tell me anything about the Knights Templar?
I sure can, Georgie. Soldiers, diplomats, mercenaries, monks, bankers, you name it, the Templars fit the bill. The greatest fighting force in Christendom, the militia of Christ.
Jeez. How did the Templars get their name?
From the building in which they set up their headquarters. The King of Jerusalem gave them part of a mosque on the Temple Mount. It was said to have been the site of the original Temple of Solomon. The order became known first as the Knights of the Temple, and later as the Knights Templar.
You're a mine of information, Andre.
Glad to be of help, Georgie.
How come the Templars became so wealthy?
There was a constant stream of new recruits to their ranks, many from noble families. They were required to swear a sacred oath of poverty, chastity, and obedience. So their money, goods, and lands were donated to the order. The Templars soon held land in France, Scotland, England, Spain, most of Europe, in fact. The poor Knights of Christ became the wealthiest power in Christendom.
Is it true the treasure of the Knights Templar was never found?
Who knows? So little knowledge of what really happened remains. Or, if it does, the truth has never been made public.
What do you mean by that?
The Templars have attained mythological status, like the King Arthur of the Britons. There are people even now who say the Templars still exist.
Do you think that's likely?
No, not for a minute.
Does the name Montfaucon mean anything to you?
Sure, it was the most grisly spectacle in Paris until the Revolution.
A public toilet?
Montfaucon was the place of execution for many thousands. A dark temple of death, with row upon row of arches, each one framing a grim exhibit. Scores of rotting corpses swung on creaking rope, while the crows devoured their flesh.
That explains the image of the hanged man. I found a reference to Montfaucon in Ireland, in a village called Lochmarn.
Lochmarn? That's where Pegram was digging.
That's right. He'd left the excavation before I arrived. Where was the site of Montfaucon?
To the northeast, near the Canal Saint-Martin, but there's nothing there now. The old gibbet was torn down during the Revolution.
Do you know Pegram well?
Not really. I met him at a conference. I would have liked to talk to him in depth, but I didn't have time.
When was this?
Oh, back in the summer, July, I think.
The second week of July?
Maybe. Yes, it was, just before Bastille Day.
So Pegram was in Paris at the same time as the other victims.
Pardon? Victims of what?
Nothing. Just thinking aloud. Thanks for your help, Andre.
You're welcome.
Excuse me?
Ah, Monsieur Stobart, n'est-ce pas?
That's correct. You remember me.
The retention of such data is part of my duty as a gendarme. That is how crime is fought, through attention to detail, not intuition.
Yes, sure. I know the identity of the dead guy. His name was Plantar.
Is that so? You knew him, did you?
No, but
We'll know everything there is to know about him soon enough.
I'm trying to be helpful here.
The best way you can help us is to go home, monsieur.
Is Rosso here?
Yes, he is. You wish to speak to him?
Yes, I do.
One moment, monsieur. Stobart is here to see you, monsieur.
Did he say what it was about?
No, monsieur.
Very well.
Hi, Inspector. Remember me?
But of course, Mr. Stobart, my mind is a well-ordered faculty. A mental classification system that's the envy of the Bibliothèque Nationale. No tricks, mark you, monsieur. Just exercise. Just as our muscles waste through inactivity, so our minds decay. But there is no need. If only people would learn to exercise their wits daily.
If he was trying to impress me, it worked. He was pompous and patronizing, but he had style.
Eh bien, if you called about the bombing, you're too late. Investigations have been closed.
But
I've been taken off the case.
what about the murderer, the dead guy?
It is out of my hands.
What was that psycho-detective business you did in the cafe?
It is my theory that the passions evoked in violent crimes create ripples in the ether, invisible to all but the possessor of a highly developed and receptive mind.
I'm impressed. Can you bend spoons, too?
I didn't think a man of your obvious intelligence would stoop to mockery.
I'm not mocking. I've had personal experience of the power of the mind. I used to get ignored at parties until I read a book that changed my life.
Really? What was it called?
Hypnotism for Fun and Profit. He looked at me as if I'd farted at a funeral.
The power of mesmerism is a rare gift, not a party trick.
You're not going to try any of that psychic interrogation on me, are you?
Do you find the thought of my probing distasteful?
Let's just say I'd rather you didn't. I've got more doubts than Doubting Thomas when it comes to mysticism.
Too bad. I think you would make an interesting subject under controlled regression.
The day I let anyone mess with my mind hasn't dawned yet. Did you find out the ID of the guy who was killed in the explosion?
I already knew who he was.
I heard that the bomb victim's name was Plantar.
Your sources are reliable.
He was a big shot at the Treasury, wasn't he? Maybe that's why you've been taken off the case.
I'm sorry, monsieur. I cannot comment.
Do you know a pair of thugs called Flap and Guido?
I have known those two since they graduated from special school. Flap is a nasty piece of work, but Guido is the real brains of the partnership. Where did you hear of them?
I met them out front of the Hotel Ubu. Don't you want to know what I found out about the killer?
I told you, monsieur, the case is closed. I have washed my hands of the whole affair.
Then I'll have to continue my investigations without your help.
No, you must forget the business of the clown completely. Go back to being an ordinary tourist, Stobart.